Anything interesting happened with Grandma last night? Grandma's staying with you, isn't she?
Yeah.
Nothing safe to say about that?
You know, I can't say anything about Grandma anymore on Facebook because her friends have started Facebook friending me.
No.
And so now I can't tell any more Grandma stories on Facebook.
Oh, you're just going to write them in a book.
I know. And there's just gazillions.
Yeah.
The biggest thing about Grandma is the minute that her eyes open, she starts asking questions.
Yes.
Yeah. And usually the first 2 or 3 questions are, is it cold outside? Is it hot outside? Am I going to need a coat? like, lady, you're still in bed. You don't need a coat in bed. You're all right.
And how about that phone? You know, it has a weather app.
Oh, my gosh. Where is my phone? Have you seen my phone? Call my phone.
You know, she does have a lot of gold nuggets, though. I remember when we were riding in the car one time, and she was talking about someone being the baby, but someone being the knee baby. And I was like, what's a knee baby? I've never heard that before.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
I'm old enough to know what a knee baby is, so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or whenever we get in a hot car and the air starts blowing, she's like, don't breathe it in, you'll get cancer. Which she read an article about how...
I don't think she read an article.
You don't think it was that?
I think somebody just said it.
Somebody just said it, and it's immediately or immediately like...
It was a reel.
Yeah, or something.
One of them ladies in the retirement home said it, and all of a sudden it was truth.
Yeah, so, something like that.
We have that a lot of times, you know, in personal injury when people call you and tell you about the value of their claim and what they believe is truth.
Because they've Googled it, or they had a friend who was in a similar accident.
Yeah.
And we always like to say, you cannot compare apples to oranges. They seem similar, but they are very, very different.
Yeah.
And every case is very, very different.
Yeah. My friend's accident, my friend's injury, my friend's recovery is never a good indicator for the value of your claim. So that's what we're going to talk about today is the value of an injury claim.
Okay.
Okay?
Okay. So what is the value of an injury?
Oh, well, now, if I could answer that question. There's a lot of pieces that go into that pot.
Okay.
We're not going to run through all of them. We don't have that much video or memory on the card.
Okay.
But we're going to hit some of the highlights about how we value a claim.
Okay.
And talk about those really quickly. For the most part, we handle 3 big kind of claims. Now, we handle boating accident claims, which usually have a higher value because they're usually very severe.
Yeah.
And then we handle med-mal cases, which are very high in value because they're usually very severe. Because medical malpractice and boating accidents are very expensive claims to pursue, it's difficult to take a small claim because the expenses are going to outrank or outrange what you're going to recover. Because in a med-mal case, especially, the doctor's going to fight you tooth and nail.
Right.
And we'll put nursing home negligence in that column as well.
Okay.
So the other 2 kinds of claims will be value claims.
Or value injury.
I'm sorry, value injury, thank you, are auto cases and workers' comp cases.
Okay.
Right? And that's the vast majority of what we do here is auto and workers' comp. And then, you know, the med-mal cases, we don't have as many, but they require just as much work.
Right.
You know, they're huge, they're big. And then the boating accident cases are huge and big.
Yeah.
But the auto cases and workers' comp cases are smaller and they kind of churn. They keep going.
Right.
And they don't take as long to resolve as med-mal cases.
Right.
Or boating accident cases. And so whenever you're comparing just the 2, workers' comp versus auto, workers' comp is very statutory driven. It's got its own chapter in the North Carolina General Statutes. And whenever you're talking about valuing your injury with workers' comp, the statutes go and tell you what your injury is worth, basically. So if you lost a finger, or if you lost your hand, or if you lost your arm, you can go to the statute and look up loss of arm and see what your arm is worth.
Do you have to completely lose the arm, or what if it's like maimed and at your side?
Yeah, there's provisions for that.
Okay.
A doctor would have to say, you've lost the use of your arm, whether you've lost your arm or not, or you got a permanent nerve injury or something like that.
Okay.
So a doctor would have to give an opinion about that. But then we just look at the chart, and there's an evaluation there. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, there's some leeway there for permanency and other situations.
And what do you mean by that?
Leeway?
Permanency in other situations. What does that mean?
Well, like, once again, back to what the question you just asked. Did I lose my arm, or did I lose the use of my arm? So if I've lost the use of my arm, there may be some type of permanency rating where I've lost 85% of it.
And permanency means for the rest of your life, this is what it's going to be.
It could be temporary permanency. It could be permanent permanency.
Yeah.
There's temporary partial, there's temporary permanent, there's permanent permanent.
Oh my gosh, I can see why we could talk about this all day.
Yeah, so there's different levels of that.
And it's all covered in the statutes.
For the most part, yeah.
For workers' comp.
All those different variances are covered.
Okay.
So, but we don't have that on the auto side. We don't know what the value of your arm is on the auto side because there's no statutory, because it's driven by common law. Okay. So we have to determine, what the value of your injury is based on our prior experiences, and a lot of times it's based on geography, demographics, that kind of thing. Because actually, from one state to another, a claim can have a different value. And certainly, even in North Carolina, from one county to another, a claim can have a different value.
Wow.
Yeah. So, so there's a big difference between the way workers' comp is calculated and auto injuries are calculated. And then, of course, the different values in the different limitations in the two.
But I would even think, even if you valued the loss of someone's sight or the loss of someone's hearing for the hundreds of thousands of dollars, you still then got to look at what pot of money do you have to work with.
Right, exactly.
With personal injury, especially with auto accidents.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Because there's limitations to how much insurance coverage there is.
Yeah.
And so a lot of times, whenever we run into limitations where someone has minimal insurance and we got a significant injury, then we want to start looking at, does this person have assets? Well, first of all, we look at, is there any underinsured motorist coverage? Is there any other third party that can contribute to this pot, right?
Right.
And if the answer to that is yes or no, regardless, we then start looking at assets. Does this person have does the person that caused the injury, the negligent person, or the negligent business, whatever the case is, do they have any assets? And can we recover those assets? And so we look at that because we want to be able to, obviously, we want our client to be able to recover for their injuries and the value of their injuries. And unfortunately, whenever there's not assets and there's not underinsured motorist coverage or other coverage, then there's just a limitation to even though the value of their injury may be more, there may be a limitation to what we can recover.
Yeah.
In spite of being able, to go after every single potential coverage that there is.
Yeah. And I've heard you have those hard conversations with the client, being like, I understand it is worth so much more, but this is all the money that there is.
Right.
And I think you handle those hard conversations really well because, again, you don't get emotional. You try to stay logical, but also empathetic at the same time.
Right.
You got a good balance there.
Well, I don't mind filing a lawsuit. I'll file a lawsuit. If you want to file a lawsuit, we'll file a lawsuit.
Yeah.
And, we'll do an asset search ahead of time.
Yeah.
I'm going to do an asset search and tell you what the outcome of it is. I just want you to have a good idea of where we're going. If we file a lawsuit and I know that you want your day in court, and that's fine. But I just want to talk about the pros and cons of that. So we just have that discussion.
Yeah.
A lot of times people don't realize, though, that the value of their injury, if we back it up to the actual point where they get injured, and the value of their injury has so much to do with what their damages are, because your recovery is driven by your damages. It's driven by two things, your injury and your damages. And that's the way that our law is set up for negligence.
Yeah, the 4 elements of negligence.
Right. So whenever you have a negligence claim against somebody, we have to, if we're going to take it to court or if we're going to pursue it, we have to prove 4 things. We have to prove there's a breach of duty. And what a breach of duty is that someone did something that was unreasonable and caused a harm.
Right.
Let me start off. Number 1, I started off with breach of duty. Number 1, there's a duty. There has to be a duty.
There has to be a duty. Okay.
First of all, there's a duty. You have to owe a duty to another person, or you have to owe a duty in your actions.
Okay, what's an example of that?
An action, best example ever is driving on the road.
I have a duty to everyone around me to drive safely.
You have a duty to drive as a reasonable person. To drive as a reasonable person would drive, to protect others from injury.
Okay.
And also to protect yourself from injury, believe it or not. You also have a duty to yourself.
Well, good.
Yeah.
Like that.
So the first element is duty. There has to be a duty. Second element then is that breach of duty. You did something to breach that duty. It doesn't mean you're a bad person. It means that you did something that wasn't reasonable.
You or you're not talking about you as the client, but the at-fault person.
I'm sorry. Yes. And if I was unclear about that, I apologize. Okay. The at-fault person did something unreasonable, and they breached their duty to the injured person.
Okay.
All
right. So we've proven that they had a duty. We've proven that there's a breach of that duty.
Yes.
And
so usually that's whenever we get the phone call.
Yeah. And
the person calls and says, "Hey, I've been injured in an accident," or they just say, "Hey, I've been in an accident."
Yeah.
So we've got to make sure we've got duty, breach, injury.
Okay.
And damages. We've got to have all 4.
And what would constitute as damages?
Okay, let me get to injury.
Okay.
Because injury is my number 3.
Yeah, let's talk about number 3 first.
So there has to be injury. So, are you hurt? That's one of the first questions we ask. Are you hurt?
Yeah.
Have you been, and if you are, have you been to the doctor? Have you been to the emergency room? Are you planning on going to the emergency room? Are you planning on going to urgent care or to your regular doctor?
Yeah.
But are you hurt? Sometimes they say, I don't know. I mean, I'm just, it depends on how close to the accident it is.
Yeah.
But sometimes they're just, adrenaline is still rushing,
Yeah.
That's why so many times at an accident scene, whenever a police officer or somebody says, "Are you okay?" and most people go, "Yeah," what they're saying is, "I'm not dead. So I'm okay. I'm not dead. My kids aren't dead. I'm okay."
I think they almost kind of say it to reassure the other person too.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily they're assessing their own body and thinking about what hurts or not. They're just going I am good enough right now.
Right. Yeah.
You can focus on something else.
Yeah. If you're triaging, I don't need triage.
Yes.
I'm not bleeding out. I'm not losing consciousness. I'm okay. I can breathe.
Yeah.
And I'm not losing consciousness.
But I've even heard of people that have broken bones or whatever, and they're still going, "I'm okay. I'm okay."
Yeah.
You feel like you have to say that to someone to calm someone else down, to kind of calm you down.
And most police officers, whenever they're busy at the scene, they're not coming back to ask you 3 or 4 more times. They've asked you, they're going to write it down. Okay, no injury. That's what they're going to write down. You say, "I'm okay." They're going to write down no injury and keep going. And that's what's going to be on the official report. No injury. Now, we can overcome that. But that's what they're going to write down.
Yeah.
So, the best answer is, I don't know.
Yeah.
Are you okay? I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm 3 minutes from being in an accident. I don't know if I'm okay.
And I know we've said this in other podcasts too, but it's always good to nail down this point. You have adrenaline running through your body after an accident. And that adrenaline can be masking so many injuries. At that moment, your brain is somewhere else. At that moment, you're thinking about other things. And so you're just not really assessing your pain at that moment.
Right.
Or it seems very dulled or numb.
Right.
You may be numb.
Right.
So just keep that in mind. I don't know is a better answer than I'm okay to a police officer.
If you can think of it. It's not life or death to answer one or the other. But if you can think of it, I don't know is a perfect answer.
Yeah.
Unless hey, my finger's broken. Hey, my hand's numb.
Yeah.
The officer doesn't need. The officer just needs to know. Do I need to call EMS or not? If they're not already on the scene.
Yeah.
So that's because element number 3 is injury. So the duty that was owed was breached, and that breached caused an injury.
Yes.
Right? And so once we have the injury, when people call in and say, yes, I was injured in an accident, great. Have you been to the doctor? Have you been to the emergency room, the urgent care, to your primary care physician? Have you seen a health care provider?
Yeah.
And whenever they say no, then we want to know how long has it been since you've had this accident. The longer that gap, the more problems that we're just going to have. Because we've got to prove that 4th element, which is damages.
Now we're getting to damages.
Now we're getting to damages.
Okay.
Because even if I broke my finger, broke my wrist, did whatever, had a gash, had a gash across my face, and I went home and didn't seek any medical care, I don't have the 4th element.
Right.
I don't have damages. If I got a gash across my face, I've got an injury, and I've got a scar, so I've got injury, but I don't have medical care. I don't have damages. And so we've got to have damages. You've got to seek medical care. Some doctor has got to say, some healthcare professional has to say, these injuries were caused by this person's breach or by this accident. They didn't pre-exist. They didn't exist before you had the accident, and now they exist now.
So that gives you a paper trail.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And you've created damages.
Yeah.
And so if you don't have the 4th element, you just don't have a claim. And so whenever it comes to the importance of valuing an injury, the first 2 questions I always ask are, what are your injuries and what are your treatment? We've got to have both to help you. You're not helping yourself. And we hear so many excuses sometimes, and I say they're excuses. They may be valid reasons. People say, I don't like going to the doctor. I don't like doctors. I don't like hospitals. I don't like hospitals. If I'm at a hospital for treatment, I'm very, 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 very sick because I can probably name on my thumbs the time I've been to an emergency room.
Yeah.
It's not my place to go. So I get that. I totally understand it. But it's just, whether you go to the emergency room or an urgent care or your primary care physician, you've got to get some treatment. And if you don't have any of those, we certainly have resources we can help you with. But there's got to be some treatment because there must be damages in order to prove your injuries are related to the accident. So the excuses of, I don't like hospitals, we've got to overcome that. Or, I've heard I don't have transportation. Well, we've got to overcome that. And in a lot of situations we can help you with that. Maybe we can help you just by brainstorming that, but we certainly can help you with that in certain situations.
Yeah.
And so those are situations where it's really important to reach out so that your attorney can help you make sure that you have established your claim so that your injury can be properly valued and so that you don't mess up your claim and your recovery for an injury that someone else caused.
Right.
And to protect you from that. Because the worst thing that could happen is that you don't get recovery for your injury and then it continues. And by the time that you do seek medical care, the gap is too wide. And now all that's done is made the insurance company's argument stronger in that, well, they could have been injured 2 weeks after the accident, or they could have fallen, or they could have hurt themselves. They come up with all kinds of stories.
Well, a lot of doctors also are hesitant to link it to an accident if it's like so many months later.
Absolutely, because usually those injuries are what we call acute, meaning they're immediate, not chronic, meaning long-lasting. Mm-hmm. And so, unless your medical provider has treated you for years and years and years, then they would know your medical history and know you didn't have a history of this condition beforehand, right, whether it's whiplash or back or whatever it is. But, if you don't have that, then, your doctors might not want to link it to the accident because they don't know you if you don't have that history with that medical provider.
Yeah.
So valuing an injury is really important, and we want to get the best value we can. But those last 2 elements, the injury and damages, are 2 of the most important things. Are you injured and have you sought medical treatment? 2 most important things that I have to know and for me to value your claim and value your injury.
It's kind of funny how damages bring value.
Yeah,
You know,
it
'cause
is.
People think of damages as like it's damage, there is no value. But
Right.
in this situation, in personal injury, damages bring value.
Bring value to your claim. And without
Yeah.
damages, you have no claim.
Yeah.
So you can sit at home and suffer,
Yeah.
or you can seek the damages, seek the treatment you need
Yeah.
so that we can value your claim properly and so that the insurance company can properly compensate you for that.
Yeah.
But that's just, really short and sweet. We could go on and on and on about value and claim, but those are the two most important things
Yeah.
is, what is your injury? And I always tell folks, head to toe. I want to know head to toe, what are your injuries? What hurts today that didn't hurt yesterday? Because that could change tomorrow. You may not realize that you got a pain in your hip yet. You may have that tomorrow morning whenever you wake up. So head to toe, tell the doctor what's going on, and then, get that medical treatment. So
Yeah.
that your claim so that your injury can be valued properly. All right?
I feel like I learned something today too.
All right. That's plain and simple, how we value your claim. And we enjoy doing it and enjoy helping people with that.
Yeah. Well, thanks for sitting down with me again today.
Absolutely.
All right.
We appreciate everybody listening in to Laughter in the Law.
Where we talk about the law with a lighthearted twist.